So Patis monkeys are known for their speed and terrestrial lifestyle. Can you share some of the insights into their maybe daily behaviors that go on here at the zoo and how their natural habitat influences the activities?
Absolutely. So, here at the zoo, the seasons really affect their daily behavior. I think we're all familiar with the really wonderful outside exhibit that these guys have with that tunnel that goes over the guest path. That is the monkeys' absolute favorite place in their whole exhibit. They love, even though they are a terrestrial animal and they do spend more time on the ground than some other primate species, they do still love having that height to watch out for predators. So usually for them, that means, when we have the dinosaurs coming to visit, or when we had the Legos here, those are their predators. So they like to watch out. But yeah, so in the wild, they usually live kind of on like those edge habitats, so where maybe like savanna meets more of a woodland, stuff like that. And so that kind of makes them adaptable in kind of multiple different situations, whether they're in the trees or they're on the ground. That also encourages them. That speed that they have is pretty phenomenal. When it's wintertime, they are obviously locked inside. These guys can't go out when it's below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And so then during the winter, we really focus on using that brain of theirs and making sure that we're keeping them busy. All zoo animals get what's called enrichment. It's various devices and things to make sure they are having that stimulation that they would be having in the wild. And we give it to them all year round, but here in the winter, because they're not getting that outside time, we make sure to be giving them extra opportunities to problem solve, to find food, all that good stuff, keep them busy, keep challenging them.
So I was doing some research, and Patis monkeys, I found out, live in small groups with a single adult male. How does that social structure impact their interactions and survival in the wild?
So we here at the Topeka Zoo, we only have one male. He's wonderful. His name is Harry. His tail's peeking out right over there. He's the protector of our group, just as he would be in the wild. But that structure means that our males have to eventually leave their maternal group and go out on their own and find a new group to lead. Ultimately, at the end of the day, with Patis monkeys, the girls are the boss. They call all the shots. So the guys are called in to do the dirty work to protect them from all the scary predators. So the girls usually stay together. We actually have 2 generations of Patis monkeys here at the zoo. Right around me, we have Frida over here and her mother, Winnie. So we do see those multiple generation groups in the wild as well with our girls, and then the boys go ahead and disperse.
So a real quick question, when you talk about how the males do the dirty work, like how do they go about protecting all of the other Patis monkeys around? What do they do? Is there something special they do, or are they just an animal that like attacks, or are they kind of more defensive?
So these guys are pretty small in the grand scheme of things, especially when you're looking at their natural predators. And so they are more bark than bite. So they have some pretty impressive canine teeth. And if you ever see them yawning is what it looks like. That's actually them showing off those canines, letting you know that they are big and scary. And then when they're particularly worked up about something, they're trying to chase something off, they do genuinely, it sounds like they bark. So they're just trying to create, it's part warning to let everybody know that there is danger, but also to kind of try and chase that predator off without having any sort of direct conflict.
I did not know this about Patis monkeys, because I always think monkeys not the fastest animal in the wild kingdom, but they're the fastest primate. So what specific adaptations enable them to achieve going so fast, and how does it help them avoid predators?
So these guys, you'll see, especially when they're running around on exhibit, they're pretty lanky. They have long arms, long legs, and that's going to allow them to kind of have that larger stride. They are also pretty skinny, so they're not having extra body weight weighing them down when they're trying to get away. So because these guys do spend a decent chunk of time on the ground, you're not gonna have that always have that natural quick escape that you might in a tree. So especially when you're in a tree, even if there's a predator also in the tree, usually the smaller guys, the small primates, they can go out on those smaller branches that will support their weight but won't support a predator's weight. Now obviously that's the ideal situation, but you know, if they're on the ground, they're collecting insects, things like that, and they see danger, the best thing they can do is just bolt. And you can see it here every once in a while. There'll be like little butterflies or moths coming through the exhibit, and you just see them full send all the way across the exhibit, really showing off that natural power.
So when they see danger, they're more adept to run than go for the tree.
Yeah, so ultimately they are always looking for that higher ground, but because, you know, as they evolved, that tree wasn't always close by, that the speed really helped them get to that safe space.
All right, so I have to ask you, because we all get hungry, right? So with their diet consisting mainly of like insects, you were just talking about fruits, and gum, which they have gum out in the wild where they're at. Okay, how do Patis monkeys locate and gather food from their environment?
So these guys just have fantastic senses all around, great eyesight, great smell, all that good stuff. And so they're familiar with where their food is going to show up. And so they're gonna look in those places. So for example, if we give these guys browse, so that's a species of trees that they can eat, you see them, they strip that bark right off. And so that's gonna help them get into that wood and take out any gum or any other contents that are in there that they would like. In terms of the fruits and the veggies, you know, the fruits, in the wild, they're not quite as sweet as we are used to here with the grocery stores here. So we do give them fruit as part of their diet. It's part of the individual diet. So we have some diet that they all receive separate from each other. And then they also have a shared diet that they forage throughout the day. And so we only give them a small amount of fruit because that's a pretty high level of sugar if we were to give them the same amount of fruit they would eat in the wild. So we supplement that with lots of veggies and things like that. But they pick at everything, they explore everything. In captivity, that means that they will figure out how to break something if you're capable of breaking it. But obviously in the wild, that means that you can find food better because you're getting into those nooks and crannies.
When you feed them here at the zoo, do you have to separate them or do they share the food? Because being as a family together, maybe you think, oh, maybe they're like my family and they share food together. Is that happening? So
it really depends on what type of food it is. So if you have a grape, for example, that's their favorite food in the whole world. They love grapes. They're not sharing. There's no loyalty when grapes are involved. So we do separate them out when they have those high value items, but then lower value, your greens, your root veggies, things like that. We do, scatter them throughout the exhibit, kind of let them naturally forage for it. I wouldn't say they share necessarily. There's very much a social hierarchy, and so the monkeys up top get to eat first, and the lower ones do have to wait. But we always make sure there's plenty, so they'll grab themselves a handful and go find themselves a perch somewhere, and then the others can come on in and grab what they need as well. So the Topeka Zoo is big on conservation, helping out the animals, and you guys do a fantastic job at that. So I want to know, what are some of the biggest threats facing the monkeys today, and what efforts are being made to ensure their long-term survival out in the wild? Right. So ultimately, a lot of people haven't heard of Patis monkeys. They're not one of the big famous conservation stories. But these guys, they face a lot of those same threats, particularly habitat destruction. As people encroach upon wild habitat, they start using land for things like farm land and stuff like that. You're going to naturally have conflict because they say, hey, free food. I've got this field of, you know, grain or whatever. This is great. Obviously, the farmers don't love that. And so you're seeing a lot of conflict there. And then just generally, because then they can't use those spaces and find food in those spaces, you're seeing essentially smaller groups because the land can't support as large of a group. So these caddis, they're not quite as at risk as some other species, but they are just a classic example of how even if a species isn't endangered right now, it's very much, it's always, you know, a little bit of development away from having a much bigger problem on our hands.
Just to wrap this up, how can people that come to the zoo help out when it comes to the conservation that the Topeka Zoo does? Is there something on the website or something like that?
So as a primate person, when I talk about conservation, I always have to highlight palm oil, which is, you know, across the road from these guys, we have our orangutans, and you know, everybody's losing habitat around the world. Those guys are losing habitat because of the farming of palm oil. And so there is an app that you can download on either app store, and that'll basically, you can scan items at the grocery store because you can't really escape palm oil. It's in most things. But what you can do is the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo has worked with a bunch of organizations to figure out whether their palm oil they're using is sustainable or not. And so you can make kind of better purchases and make sure that you're supporting that sustainable palm oil so that, you know, we're not tearing down more trees and taking away these guys' habitat.